Hello, hello. Today, good morning or good afternoon, whatever you're calling in, and welcome to Atorus Unscripted webinar today in partnership with Fuse. And this series has existed because of the conversation with best practices frameworks roadmap, and in parallel, talking like what happens when you try to make all of this work. So today's question is one that a lot of teams are sitting with right now, whether they are saying it out loud or not. Is your data actually AI ready? And we are going to spend the next hour with that question and beyond and have a conversation. And we invited you to that room as well. So we can chat and you can also listen to people who work with all these challenges every single day. And today, I'm your host. My name is Aga, and I'm joined by two fantastic people who will cover the full picture. Starting with Christine, Executive Director of Clinical Data Management in Atorus, with over 30 years in the field, been responsible for clinical data quality and management throughout paper studies, EDC era, and now also AI in that picture. And she's also very experienced across the industry, regardless of the size of the company. I also am delighted to share this conversation with Michael Collins, an Associate Data Solution Engineer at Atorus, who builds AI-powered tools for clinical teams and beyond, and knows exactly how it looks like to work with data with AI nowadays. So, Christine, Michael, welcome and good to have you here. And before we start, a short housekeeping note that this webinar is recorded, and also you have a panel of Q&A somewhere down over here where you can submit your questions. So let's get this started. So before we get to AI readiness, I want to start today with fundamental questions. I think that the phrase data as a product is doing a lot of tremendous work right now. However, as it is usually, people might mean very different things when they say it. So let me start with Christine. You've been managing data ages, but when someone says, okay, sorry, not ages. So when someone says treat data as a product, like what does it actually mean for you, for your team, for how we work?
Yeah. I think when we start looking at data, at least from the data management perspective, what we're looking at is the data that we collect about each of those individual studies. So we're looking at both the data that supports the research. So looking at creating case report forms, having sites do data entry, and all of that data goes to support the clinical conclusions at the end. So everything that's going to go into that CSR, everything that we need to do, SDTM and those kind of data sets. On top of that, we also are collecting a layer of operational data. So how quickly do we go from protocol to case report form? How quickly do we go from query issued to query resolved? How efficient are the teams at doing that data review? What's the timeline and the volume of data that we feel like has changed across that clinical data when we issue those queries? So we have sort of these two separate and really equally important pieces of data. So I think when we're talking about data as a product, we're really talking about both of those. So what do we use to support our conclusions about how we conduct the work, and how clean and efficient is the clinical component of it? How well are we getting to the point where we can hand off that data to our teammates and feel confident in what's there?
Okay, and like looking on the same question, but maybe from a different perspective, from the engineering side, like Michael, like from your standpoint, how or what does treating data as a product change or about how the data is built, maintained, and eventually used for any downstream activity?
Yeah, so as the engineer, I kind of look at it as something where uh, there's this dynamic between the owner and then the consumer. And so the engineer kind of sits in between that. And so uh, as data's coming in, you have to think about, okay, who's the owner? Did they kind of prepare the data in the right way for me? Some organizations you can't always assume that it is, and so it's okay sometimes just to be like, I get what I get. Then you're going to be managing the data and handling it, and then you're going to be passing it to the next consumer. And nowadays, that consumer, at least in our case here, is an LLM. And so you have to be uh, ready for this kind of like unforgiving and sometimes incorrect consumer of data. Um, and it kind of forces you to think, yeah, like how does this change the way that we interact with it? Um, I think that in the industry we've uh already optimized a lot for like correctness. So like is a value correct? Does the value match what's in the CRF? Does it pass validation? That kind of thing. And so we can already assume that yeah, we want to work with the correct data, but then going to an LLM, it's one step more. It's you know, is the data actually right for what the LLM wants to do and what you want out of the LLM?
Mm-hmm. So, Christine, I would ask, are you as a data manager, owner or consumer then as well?
Oh, we get to be both. I think we get to be both, which is really exciting because we're going to be able to look at all right. We want to give the engineering team what they need, and we want to be able to give them that in a way that makes sense for what we're trying to do in the future. So when we're looking at, all right, give us your data. I'm going to use that data. I'm going to write reports. I'm going to give you queries based on that data. I'm going to give you conclusions about how far away we are from wrapping up the study. And then I'm going to be able to pass not only that layer of the clinical data, but the layer of operational data over to another group and say, hey, here's what the data looks like at this point in time. Here's what the data looks like at this point in time. And I would like you to help me draw some conclusions from that. And if I'm not taking care of that data, if I'm not making sure that what I'm doing with that data is sort of aligns with the goal of the project, then I'm not giving Michael enough to do what he needs to do. So I can give you all of that. But if all of what I'm giving you was for a collection of I don't know, allergy studies. And then what I'm asking for in return is how can I do this efficiently, easier, better slash AI-ish in an oncology study? I'm probably not going to get what I need to get out of that. So you really have to take care of what you're not only of what you're producing, but you have to take care of where it came from and make sure that you're able to use what you get and able to provide the thing that is going to be the most useful for the rest of the teams. So yeah, I'm lucky I just get to be both.
Absolutely. So, Michael, like when we look at like how the engineering side defines product and how the operational side defines product, do you think that there is like an alignment or there is a gap or there is maybe still room for thought about the readiness or how these two sides communicate with each other?
Yeah. The readiness conversation is really important. That's, what we're here for. And um, so analyzing AI readiness, there's so much to it. So you can kind of take a step back, and I have this kind of idea that I like to run with. I forget who came up with this idea, but it's very popular. You might have heard it before, but you kind of pretend that you've got like this intern that's coming in, and they're new to this project. They might have some like experience, like maybe they're good at writing code or scripts or whatnot, but they might not have the domain knowledge yet in place for whatever like project you want to be doing. So you kind of, you close your eyes and you imagine, okay, they're handed this task. What can they do with it? And then you want to start thinking, all right, what would they be asking for? What would they get stuck on? And then that can kind of guide you for, okay, they're missing, this kind of idea. That's going to start preparing you for, okay, are we ready to actually solve this specific task, this kind of problem? If you, yeah, like you can't get the work done, then you need to assume that an LLM is not going to be able to get that work done either. It gets into the kind of idea of you want to start writing down this domain knowledge. You want to start getting ready for managing just this all this context that you're going to be building over time.
Mhm. Okay, so Christine, when we talk about this AI data readiness together, bonded, and I love Michael your intern analogy. I think like that's a perfect one to show and imagine what it brings to the table, how to feed it, like how to operate as well. So Christine, like when you look from the data perspective, what makes the data good? Like to feed those specific needs or to make as well this intern successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's having a really good foundational knowledge of the process of how we go through what we go through on a day-to-day basis. So it, it's looking at really getting to how do I get to this set of queries, and are these good queries, and how do I decide if those are good queries? How do I look at the process of evaluating a case report form and saying, oh, well, these are important forms. This is really critical data. I am really excited to be able to have that piece of it in there and understanding how you go from the protocol. And I think for me, what really drives it home is being able to kind of articulate what it's like to sit in the meetings. So this is what you hear in these meetings, especially as data managers. We're not often talking. We're not often the center of attention, even though, we should be. We're sitting there observing how these decisions get made and being able to take that conversation, being able to understand the decisions that go into deciding what variables are going to go into the data and having an understanding of the process as we build the data collection tools and the process of how we make sure that data is accurate, complete, and ready for the teams that follow. I think if you can get data that supports that process, then you can get to the point where you're able to pass that off and build some really good tools that will help you do those things more efficiently and maybe with more input from some of your data management team. I like to think of it as let's understand the process, let's automate what we can, and then let's let the the people in the room talk about what really matters as far as data collection and the way we're going to clean the data. We want to get to the conversations that mean something versus the conversations around, oh, well, we found 14 discrepant data points. That's so boring. But if we have the right tools, then we can move pretty quickly from having those, discrepancy discussions to something that's really a little bit more impactful.
hmm And I'll just I have a follow-up thought that just crossed my mind is like because the question of quality of the importance of data itself is it's nothing new to data management. It's like even obvious, but has or maybe has not AI changed what good enough means?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, there's a for me there's an existing idea that okay, well let's do all of this risk based. Let's find the ways that we can interact with the data and let's talk about what's good enough. Let's talk about not maybe not finding every single discrepancy within that data, but let's talk about what the clinical data looks like when it's clean enough for us to make decisions. That does come into sort of like all the underlying processes that we've been used to doing. And I've seen kind of both sides of an argument sort of emerging over the past couple of months. One that says, if you have the power and you have the capability and you have the tools that make everything so much more efficient and faster and improve the quality, then why do I need to do risk-based anything in data management? I have all of the data, so I only clean all of the data. I have the computing power and the tools and building in those efficiencies so I can do all of it. But then there's another kind of flip side to that is you also have the computing power to really determine what's important. You also have the tools and the ability to say, oh, well, if we're really looking at this the right way, we don't need to clean all of it. So it, I'm really keyed in to kind of seeing where that argument goes because I do see the value of both sides. I mean, for me, I like to take care of the mundane things so I can look at the stuff that's really interesting and being able to look at the items that are really driving some of the risk-based assessments. That stuff is really cool. And I would be pretty sad if we decided that we're just gonna ignore that piece of it.
Okay. And Michael, like from your side, like when you're building tools or solutions that use that AI and LLMs, and looking at the data underneath them, what is the first thing that you check or maybe not check now, or something that it's very important before applying any LLM or any models?
Yeah, yeah. So kind of how I mentioned before, you can almost assume like, yeah, obviously you're going to be providing the correct data, but there's this gap between like uh correct and the right data for the LLM being two completely different things. So like if a stat programmer is reading TLF and they're reading all the footnotes and all the annotations, they're able to, you know, they have all the background knowledge and they can just read through it and they understand what's going on. But you hand that to an LLM and it's going to get a little bit confused because it doesn't have the right information within the entire system. And this kind of forces you to think about, okay, how is the data structured? How can we parse it out? LLMs really like JSON or HTML, that kind of thing. So there's the technical side of it where you want to be providing the right shape of the data beyond it just being the correct data. There's like a project we did back in like late 2024, 2025. It was a RAG project, and I'm assuming most people know what RAG is, retrieval augmented generation, where the main idea is you're taking a document, you're chunking out information, and you're embedding it, so turning it into a value that represents like a semantic meaning. And then you can take user queries, you can embed that, and then you do a comparison and you feed it back. And it's a way to provide an LLM with just like really relevant context. And it's been really popular, but there's like some drawbacks to it where if the data isn't sitting right, if you can't chunk it correctly, then maybe that chunk loses it's situationally in the document, it loses the context and it's kind of stripped away from it. And so now the LLM doesn't really understand like, okay, what does this data have to do with the actual like question at hand? So you really have to just be aware of, yeah, you have the right data, you have the correct information, but is it formatted in a way? Can you do the actual hard part of organizing it in a way that's ready for the system? And that's where all the fun's at. It's a challenge.
Absolutely. And I think that it's also kind of like some may think it's boring and or it's not as glamorous or as the other areas where you can apply LLM.
Mm,
This work, I assume, pays off later on where you can um, get the full potential of the data you have and even the one that you didn't or haven't imagined that could be there as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I really love also the real case example that you mentioned. Is there like maybe Christine from your side, like recently? I know that you are a bit, or not a bit, like AI hyped as well. Something like one example that
Yeah.
you have noticed lately with the application of the AI on the clinical data.
Yeah, there's a great one, and it kind of parallels my goals. So, what I have done my entire career is open up a protocol. First thing I do when we get assigned a study, in order for me to be able to understand anything that's going to happen with data management after, we're going to do that work. Open up the protocol. I look at the schedule of events. The schedule of events is usually a really pretty grid. It's got all of the assessments down one side, all of the visits across the top, and it gives you a nice summary of every interaction that the site's going to have with the patient, with the exception of 1,000 footnotes on every page. And every one of those footnotes has a little symbol that matches one of these visits where we're going to do something in that visit that isn't the same. So unless you're skilled at being able to look at that and understand, all right, I already have 85 assessments. I already have 36 visits. Oh, it's an oncology study, so now there are cycles. Oh, it's got long-term follow-up, so now I have transitions between regular study and long-term follow-up to worry about. I can't even figure out how many pages are supposed to be in this database unless I really understand what's in each of those footnotes. And I understand the implications of what that means for that particular indication. So if I'm feeding an AI tool and I'm like, oh, well, look at the schedule of events. That is really where I see some of the problematic behavior after that. I'm like, great. And I like to speak nicely to the AI tool. Like, yeah, that is lovely. Thank you so much. You missed 14 footnotes. Can you look at those too? So I think the parallel is really obvious from Michael's. Unless you can read it and understand it, unless I can give you more information on what you do with those footnotes, it's the same thing as when I'm talking to the new intern. Like it seems really basic. Look at the schedule of events, count how many things are down, count how many things are over, and tell me how many things I'm going to have in my database. Tricked you. There's 14 footnotes. So now you have to look at each one of those. And you have to really understand what those footnotes mean by indication. And there's a potential cycle implication. So yeah, unless you're able to get that data in a format that the machine can read, the machine's not going to learn anything from it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's how the collaboration also goes, right? Like when you have the limb part and the human, so that you can join forces. You're not replacing one or another. I'm also curious because we talk a lot of successes and POCs, and eventually
Mhm.
wanted to make it applicable product, but in that road, there are hiccups and there are some failures or anything like that. Is there any kind of example, like real life, when something like happened, like you've seen AI applied to data that wasn't ready for it, or was not good enough in the sense what good enough is, and do you like what happened? Like what were the ups and downs over here? Maybe Michael, do you have any example that you can share?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, like I mentioned before, there was this RAG project that, well, the goal of that RAG project was we wanted a way for users to be able to like interact with our documentation for packages that are specific to OpenVal, one of our products. And so, like I mentioned before, the data itself was correct. These R packages have good documentation. They have the correct documentation. They're all validated. And we're pulling this data out and we're just like wondering why is the LLM hallucinating or why is it making like uh, finding a misunderstanding between like a function that's in a different package, but then it's not related to the user question. There's just like all this mismatch. And we realized that it's because we're stripping away the in the chunk that we're pulling away and embedding, we're stripping it away from that global context. And so it like the data just wasn't, this isn't the right way, or the right data for this type of project. But then we have this newer project that we did RAG as well, and it's for RFI, so like request for information. And it's successful because the data that's going into it, it's coming from this huge library of questions and answers that we can just chunk those questions and answers, and taking it away from like the global context of the document, it doesn't totally disrupt the semantic meaning of those question and answer pairs. And so that's like a really great use case for RAG. I mean, you have to actually like think about, okay, what is the right tool for the job at hand? And it's just like, yeah, it's the idea of is this the right thing to be using at this time? You can't just say, yeah, we're going to use AI because we want to use AI. You have to actually have a reason to grab it.
Oh, that's absolutely like to like hit homes. So Christine, I'm wondering like looking at small and large organization as well and
Yeah.
how they work with data and tools. Is there anything that they can learn from each other and what leverages smaller organization or mid have versus the large and other way around?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a very giant soft spot for a small biotech organization. I absolutely love being in a place where we're doing really great science, and that scientist is actually sitting next to me while I'm looking at different ways to review the data, and I'm making sure that our GDPR complies with regulations. So there are so many people wearing so many different hats in those types of organizations that it's just a open breeding ground for opportunities to look at making some changes. So I was sitting down with a biotech earlier this week, and uh, intentionally I'm going through what we traditionally do, and they're politely nodding, and they're like, what are you doing with AI? What are you doing with AI? Because it's a question that comes up incessantly these days. Like, what are you doing with AI? So, then I get the opportunity to talk about, oh, there's this proof of concept. We're going from we're looking at data at specific points where we had had the opportunity to go back in and look at work we had done a year ago. All right, well, here's where that data was. Here's where we'd found these discrepancies, and being able to kind of reproduce those results with some AI tools, and the joy on her face about being able to potentially do some of that work in-house at her biotech was easily contrasted with watching some of the larger pharma organizations. So small biotech, they're like all about it. I'm really embracing it, really, really interested, and really able to move quickly. They sometimes don't even have SOPs written for how they're going to do a data review. So anything that you suggest or you put out there for them, they're like, yeah, we could do it. Yeah, we could do it. Let me see your SOP that governs it. So you can kind of really move the needle quickly and institute some of these things that are really exciting for them fast. Now, if you're at a big organization, they have a ton of background data. So they've been running oncology studies for decades, and they have a really good library of ECRFs that they use. They have a lot of historical information on what finally gets included in the CSR. So they've got a lot of that operational data that you can pull into some of these predictive platforms and be like, all right, you guys are all set. You can do that part of it, but when you start talking about, all right, well, let's put this into practice and see what happens. They're like, great, here's our 4-year timeline. We're going to have to pilot it on one study, and that's going to have to be in this part over here. They are just a lot slower to move. So they have data that's potentially closer to being AI ready, where your small biotech has some like thoughts on what they have to do. And I really love a small biotech and a novel indication. So they have zero background information on how to build a case report form. So they're ready to embrace it, but they don't necessarily have all the little bits and pieces that would make it super easy. Where, your larger organization has data in spades, but not necessarily the inclination or the ability to move as fast as your small biotech.
Mm. I thought that I have, like, it will be lovely to kind of have
Right.
combine it, like learn from each other and collaborate in a way that you can leverage both strengths. So what the larger organization can bring to the table and the smaller one, and then I can just think about what outcome it might have and the impact in general. And say like looking at the impact and the question that Christine said, like what are we doing with AI, or what are we doing with AI and data? So Michael, is sky the limit, or we do have some ceiling at this moment?
There's definitely a big ceiling. I mean, LLMs they're good at rephrasing things. They're generally okay at interpreting things, but they're not here to be coming up with new things. That you can't just hand it some data and say, come help us derive some truth from this information. And so you really have to pick and choose your battles. Um, I think in clinical work, the model and its decision shouldn't be the source of truth. It should be like more of a lens into an existing truth that it's like analyzing, looking at. So you definitely have to choose your battles.
Okay. All right. And Christine, like from your side, like what would you see as a really emerging space in clinical data management where the AI is coming and is and already doing really good job?
I think doing a really good job is going to be pretty subjective. We've been kind of looking at ways we could automate what we're doing for ages. So we were already thinking about, oh, that is a pain to keep doing that over and over and over again. And like you kindly pointed out, Aga, I've been doing this since we were writing this stuff down on a stone tablet. So I've seen kind of the evolution of this is a way we can do it better. This is a way that we can do it better. And we've been looking at those kinds of automations for a really long time. So looking at kind of what we can do incrementally on top of that. How do we do better? How do we make better decisions? I think those are the places where we can really have some impact in data management. So looking, I think we talked about it a couple times, like designing case report forms is an area that's really taken off. It, every EDC vendor that you talk to is like, have you seen our AI? Have you seen the AI? Have you seen our AI? Have you met our AI? And the AI is a mascot that will come up and shake your hand, which I find unnerving and unsettling in many ways. But I think that is a place where it's clear AI is going to have a huge impact. Some of the other sort of supplemental data collection tools, like looking at designing an ePro with AI, looking at making some of the more straightforward tasks and activities that we do that we've got a lot of historical reference for. That's probably a place where AI is going to come in and have a pretty big impact because we have enough data to support what it's doing. We have enough. We can look at a case report form design and the output of what the AI tool is doing and be like, that is a good one. Or we can look at it and be like, oh, and then you can go back and troubleshoot. But I think it's the areas right now immediately where we have the ability to have sort of some of the same insight and decide if it's good or not. I think those are the places where we're gonna see AI really really take off in the next couple of months, probably weeks. Everything moves so fast.
That's true. That's true. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with all of that. I wanted to also invite to that group when we have consumer, owner, and LLM and data and AI, like ownership question. Because I'll just put a little bit from my strategic lens, like where I think some of the organization gets stuck because this ownership lines and they are blurs these lines, and we have an output that has been produced, then quality trace back to the data, then to the process, to the person. And yeah, so data itself, like at least for me, that's what I think strongly. Like the quality, the readiness itself, regardless data or AI, it's a process. It's not a deliverable, it's not a database log, not a sign off, something that is ongoing. But in the same time, if it's ongoing, it's very hard to operationalize, to make it a system. So when you look, how do you actually make it continuous rather than episodic or a one-off? Michael, how do you do that? How do you make that an ongoing?
Yeah, I think that as engineers, we've already established that kind of cadence in like continuing data processing and just keeping things on track. And when it comes to data for an LLM, it's no different. You need to maintain, really robust versioning control and different tracking. You have to uh, like actually, yeah, track your different artifacts. So like let's say you have a team that's building out like a skill library, which is something that we really like doing here for our different like agents. You need to actually like maintain the changes that are being done, and you need to set up monitoring for evaluations for like your agents and whatnot. It's the continuous quality question has already kind of been like answered through just regular data processing and whatnot, and you're just applying it now to a new consumer, the LLM.
And Christine, from the standpoint of like day-to-day work, how you can embed that in a workflows or with in your daily job and work.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a continuous process, no matter what. It didn't used to be a continuous process. We would wait until the end, and now we're gonna do a whole bunch of work. But with the evolution of technology and really just better thinking about how we're operating, the process for us is do it all the time. Embed it in what you're doing. So as we're looking at how we're going to get to clean at the end, the important parts are defining what your definition of clean is. What does ready look like? And I mean, I think we would do the same thing in situations where we're looking more at that operational data that the tools are going to feed off of. It- what does good look like? And let's make sure that we're always putting data in there that's good, that gives us enough information to decide if that's going to stay or going to go. So as you work through your process of how you're collecting and managing that data, it's no different for me than collecting and managing the clinical data that kind of sits underneath. What do you need to see that's really gonna drive a process? What do you need to evaluate that's going to tell you that this process has improved? And being able to feed that sort of data collection in the same way you feed data into a clinical database. There are tons of parallels between that. So it's always having that process in mind of what you're going to use that data for, and keeping an eye on sort of long-term strategy versus short-term, throw it over there and be done with it.
I love that to broad the process because I feel like it's just circling back about the question that we might add to this conversation where we are heading. Like we are asking, is your data AI ready? But I'm tempted since a few days to actually ask like, is your process AI ready? Based on what's a tons of conversations and also today's one. Like, do you understand what you're doing enough to know what you're asking AI to do or where you invite AI to do? So like Christine, like does that reframed question
Oh,
change anything or maybe, you know, is
oh,
completely off?
no. I love the reframe of it, the only way you're going to look at is your data ready, is understand how you're getting to your data. And the only way you understand that is to understand the process. So if you go back to the idea of training an intern, I'm not gonna trust an intern who doesn't understand my process. So the first thing I'm going to think about when I start thinking about any kind of AI project is how well I understand what's happening. Because it kind of pulls forward from there, right? Like if I understand the process of what I'm doing, I understand the data that supports that process. Like I said, this isn't uh, working more efficiently isn't sort of a new concept. I know when I want to kind of impact a process and I want that process to work more efficiently, I have to be able to measure how I'm going to make that happen. So a lot of that is just collecting the right data to then show it to somebody else and be like, hey, I saved us 4 weeks here. So this part of it works. And then being able to kind of carry that forward to the rest of the process. So not necessarily just the benchmarking, but also understanding the underlying activities and the underlying decisions that get made along that process are really the places where you can easily tag on some assist from our AI friends.
That's absolutely awesome. And I know, Michael, you have been ta like adding this process and the context and kind of this knowledge in your previous set. So, like, how about your lenses? Like, how it blends with this? Is your process AI ready? Is it the question, like number one, or maybe a second or third?
Yeah, if your process isn't established, then how are you going to figure out where an LLM fits in? And so I think something really effective to do, and uh, it's pretty simple. Just find smaller challenges that an LLM can solve and think about, okay, well, what can LLMs do? They can, like I said earlier, they're okay at interpreting data. They're good at summarizing data. They're not good at coming up with new things. And so you need to find where in your workflow an LLM can sit and make some sort of efficient gain, whether it's like time or whatever, and let those small wins build over time. So like with code generation, uh, even just getting that first pass and getting the code running, um, it doesn't sound like it's this huge like accomplishment, but that saves time for stat programmers, and so that adds up over time. So just landing on some win within like a general workflow. You don't have to solve the entire pipeline. You just find something specific that an LLM can actually solve and land on that.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes those baby steps, like one by one, trying
Yeah.
by trying, and then this value compounds and you
Hmm.
drive the change and the workflow, the process. You see where maybe are the gaps or where are the spaces that it's not really necessary or not at this moment a right fit to
Right.
use. Christine, I also look at the time-consuming activities that you might have in data management. We do have from the audience an example from lab sample tracking or management and reconciliation of the resulting data with EDC. And of course, there is a desire to make this more efficient and you know any significant progress over here. Can you imagine, or maybe there is an idea how AI might be able to help with this?
Yeah, it is a giant sort of albatross that kind of hangs over every data management project, right? It is unpredictable. It is subject to a lot of things that are sort of out of data management control. It's one of the items that consistently pops up 3 days before database lock. Oh, we just found out that this site hasn't sent in lab samples. All right. So it is something that is really has the potential to prevent a database lock from happening on time, and something that is really hard to control up to the point of the completion of the study. So there, I mean, I will tell you this just to give you guys an idea of how impactful. When I was involved in creating costing algorithms for data management work for a CRO, the manual listing review and the external data reconciliation are potential places where you just have to put a ceiling on the amount of hours you're going to spend on it, because it has the potential to just blow up an entire budget. So yeah, that is a place that is rich with opportunities for being able to affect some change with AI. I sat down and had a talk with my friend Claude a couple of weeks ago just to go through the process of figuring out how to explain the process in enough detail to people who are used to dealing with particular lab values in sort of a different way. So not only can you affect the ultimate amount of time that you're spending doing that activity on each individual study, like you're able to really put your thoughts into a way that you can share with a group of people using the AI. So I just throw a little plug in there for just having those kinds of chats with your AI tools and being able to share that information out with groups of people so that they can understand it in a kind of more cohesive way. But if we're talking about just that process, there's probably, I think, in talking it over internally, 4 or 5, 6 potential places just in that process where you can apply some AI tools and either get to discrepancies faster or get to results based on other inputs from the study. So I can tell you your status of where things are a little bit quicker based on some AI intervention, and I can get to the point where I can find those discrepancies faster based on some AI intervention. So yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Okay, that's good. Michael, from the other side, like from the engineering side, oh, that will be a challenge. Like, what's the question that nobody is asking, but they should be? To you even. Like when someone is coming saying, I need to apply AI, I have this data. What's the question nobody is asking?
Okay, well, this one's maybe a little funny, but sometimes you have to ask, will the end user even want this tool? Which is like a question that a lot of people don't even want to think about because they assume, yeah, it's AI. Who doesn't want to use some AI? But you have to think about like, yeah, do these people want to actually sit down and use your tools? Do they think that it'll make them more efficient, or are they like, it's actually going to bog me down? And so finding out if the tool is even going to be efficient in the first place is like a really easy way to answer that question. Like, is there actual purpose to this? So my recommendation would be open up the door to communication and be honest with each other and think about, okay, do we need this? Or is it gonna just like be a waste of time in a sense?
I love it. Like a step back
Yeah, yeah.
from the enormous like pace of the information, innovation, new, and kind
Hmm.
of like where to cut through noise in a positive way. Like how to
Yeah.
kind of find those pain
Hmm.
points that really, really can move the needle at the end
Hmm.
of that. Oh, I love it. And Christine, a question to you. Like you have like let's play Genie in the bottle. If you could change one thing, how about the industry thinks about data quality, its readiness, one belief, one practice, what would you pick? You have one, only one.
Oh,
I know.
okay. Okay. All right. I only have one. I only
One.
have one. I think it is the ability of the individual team members to really impact what's happening on a particular study. So, like I said, we are traditionally a pretty quiet group. We like to just go about our business and get some stuff done. And I think that one of the most important changes we're going to see um, uh, from AI tools and extensive automation is the ability of individual team members to really contribute their knowledge and not just of finding discrepancies or cleaning data of how we get to the solutions faster and how we can design and collect the data in a way that makes it so much better. I think that looking at the ways that the data managers interact, not just with that clinical data, but the operational data and the data that sits behind that data and the data that's over here. I think that elevating those team members from people who issue queries to people who can contribute in a way that really pushes a study forward. I mean, that is the one thing I would change faster than anything else.
Oh, that's good. Michael, maybe you have one wish. I mean, I'm not making them true, I can't promise, but
Yeah, I mean, I think like a general recommendation would be kind of like what I mentioned before. It's just like uh, getting smaller and focusing on one piece of a workflow. You don't have to have the entire uh, thing solved. You can kind of uh, solve one challenge, one problem, and then let it build because you're going to start realizing, okay, what's actually important to solve. I really think that the teams that are getting the most out of AI are ones that are being really open about like their development workflows and how they're using it, and they're not trying to just like automate an entire thing. They're just trying to like, get some wins where they can be more efficient. So I would go back to open the door of communication. How are you guys using it? And focus on that and just solving the smaller challenges first.
mm. It also it's not on like not only your LLM will be happy, but also engineering team, development team, the downstream analytics team will certainly benefit from general concept of readiness of looking at the data like you both mentioned about. Maybe this AI will be a little bit a nudge to even think in a bigger picture. And before we kind of wrap up, I always end and ask in the end on the Unscripted series the same way with one thing, but something like if someone listening today is with us and takes nothing else from this conversation that we just had, what's the one thing you would want them to sit with, to remember, to bring back to the team or reflect on? Maybe Christine, you can start.
I would say that as we go through these changes, I would want people to take away, we've done this before. Changes and innovation in this space aren't new. It isn't revolutionary that we're trying to do things more efficiently. It isn't out of nowhere where people are looking at how we do what we do faster. So I know that there's a lot of uncertainty about well, if we do it faster, then I'm going to be eating soup out of a can for the rest of my life. Um, I would just encourage people to think of all of the ways that we have as data managers to improve the lives of the patients at the end, improve the lives of the people around us as we go through these changes. And I think it's important for everyone who's looking at using AI, that you're going to need to do that in a way that's strategic, and you're going to need to do that in a way that really does require people to think more than they've done in recent times. So automate and take away the mundane so that you can focus on the stuff that is really cool about what you're doing. I think if you can do that and you can engage and entertain those conversations, not only in your small study teams, but in a broader sense, then you can be assured that innovations that we make will be in service of getting to good or bad medicines faster.
Okay. And Michael, what's your one thing that you want people to take from this session today?
Um, I would say, don't use AI just for the sake of saying you're using AI. I stole that from Mike Stackhouse. That's just a good one. You can't just say that you want to use AI and then just go in blindly. You have to have a specific challenge that you want to solve, a specific gap that needs closing. And going off what Christine said, preferably close a gap that's mundane and boring so that you can focus on the actual interesting part and let your developers and whoever like use their brain to actually solve interesting challenges that they're good at.
Mm. Okay, thank you. And I'll add mine on the top of it because today we covered tons of many, aspects and food for thought for future. And probably we can have another session with follow-ups with all these. And we started today asking is your data AI ready? And I think based on what we said, and the one that it's even harder to answer, but also very viable, is your process AI ready? And that this readiness for data, for AI, for our processes isn't a set in stone milestone. It's more like a discipline. So it's like discipline that starts with understanding what you're doing, what you want to achieve, why you're doing what you want. And I'll echo Michael and Christine about really kind of nailing it down, like understanding, go deeper and see and find those pains and gaps and whatever you want before you ask AI to do it faster, more efficient, you name it. So that's a food for thought after today's conversation. And Michael, Christine, thank you so much. That was the conversation that this series exists for. And thank you for joining and sharing your experience, knowledge, and thoughts. I do appreciate your time and bringing this expertise to the table. And I also wanted to thank Fuse for this joint session today and the entire partnership. Happy that we can bring that to the wider audience and to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for your time. The recording will be available, and I hope also that this conversation will spark some of the ideas, innovation, and also more and more questions and answers eventually. And good luck with bringing that to life. And thank you so much. See you on the next webinars and have a great day today. Thank you so much.